Hey everyone, and welcome along to episode 103 of the Hunger for the Hustle podcast. I know it might say episode 104 up in the corner of your screens, but ignore that. That is an error that we will fix later. Welcome to the show. It's been a short break for me, and I am really glad to be back. I'm really glad to be joined by my guest today, Samantha Sacchi. Samantha, how are you?
I am great. So happy to be here today, Jake.
Awesome. My pleasure to have you here. We are going to be, the title of today's podcast is Bringing Feminine Principles into Entrepreneurship. Me and Samantha met a couple of weeks ago at a lovely cafe on the side of Albert Park Lake here in Melbourne, and she posed a couple of fantastic topics to me that we thought we could talk about on the podcast. So good, in fact, that I had to split them into two so we can do 2 episodes because there was just too much juice to fit into 1 hour, and there's only so much juice anyone can handle. I'll give you a bit of background on Samantha and who she is. Samantha is a life and business strategist, coach, and educator specializing in emotional intelligence, spiritual alignment, and self-leadership. She has lived in 10 cities across 4 continents. Her background is in international economics and business management, but she slowly worked her way into an emotional intelligence coaching, neuro-linguistic programming, and a variety of healing techniques. Through her business, The Self Club, she creates powerful spaces and tools for people to navigate their inner world and align with their purpose. Samantha loves to leverage her own life and entrepreneurial experiences to empower others to understand and accept themselves, to have better relationships, to grow, evolve, and lead the most fulfilling, aligned life. Samantha also has a business in Spain with her mom, Marley Camino, where they take people from all over the world on the famous spiritual walk, the Camino de Santiago. I hope my pronunciation is pretty good there. Samantha, awesome to have you here. Couldn't think of a better person for the podcast based on what you do. And of course, you have the background in business and entrepreneurship. So tell us, how did you get started doing that business with your mom in Spain?
Yeah, Jay, thanks for that intro. It's a funny story that I think after we used to live in Miami, and my mom had to leave Miami and leave the company she was working with. And we've always been very entrepreneurial. Like my entire family, I think one person in all of my entire family, which is ginormous, is actually employed, and he's a pilot. So it's kind of hard to be self-employed. Yeah. And after my mom left, she moved to Spain, and we were just like, okay, what do we do now? Right. And eventually she did the Camino, this pilgrimage, this walk, which is very spiritual. People go to like find themselves. And when she was on it, she saw people doing it with more support and more comfort, right? And she had to like sleep at a barn one night, because she didn't have any support. She was totally on her own. And when she came back, it completely transformed her life. So it was very much, how can I bring more people to this? And she had the people skills and the event organization, and I had the sort of like marketing and website knowledge and that side. So she was just organizing, and I was getting it out there and talking to people, and building the website and putting ads out there. And slowly, just from the first group that was back in 2010 to now having, well, let's leave year 2020 and how COVID hit to one side, but right before that, having a 15-person team and bringing hundreds of people per year. It's been really beautiful.
That's fantastic. That is awesome. And how long is the walk? Is it like a day walk, a couple of days? Do you have to stay somewhere overnight?
Yeah, no, it's a few days. So the minimum to say you did it and get the sort of certificate, let's say, is 100K from a few different points you can start. But a lot of people, like the whole way, let's say, that a lot of people do is from the border of France. So that's 780 kilometers, takes about 35 days.
Okay. Wow. So you say it's a spiritual walk, it's really more of a hike.
Well, the lines are thin, I suppose, but it does, the pilgrimage, right? It is that back in the day, people used to go from their home to this special sacred place, right? Now the paths are a little more, tread, and it's become more like of a tourist thing. But yeah, it is a bit of a hike, definitely.
For sure. And how many times have you done it? Or part of it?
I've done 3, like for myself, and then obviously for work and little bits in here and charity walks that we've done, many other times. But for myself, three segments of over 100K.
That's brilliant.
And it's changed my life every time, by the way, like life changing every single time. Yeah.
Added value every time.
Yeah.
Good. How do you find it working in that family environment? I know it works for some people, not so much for others. I guess it did work for you because you did it for a while.
Yeah. Look, I think you have to have, speaking of feminine principles, a level of emotional intelligence, because family is where, I think we can all relate to this, our buttons can be pushed the most, right? And a lot of people that don't have the self-awareness to understand those triggers, to manage those emotions, find it impossible to work with family because it's just too much, right? The triggers and the wounding and the old flashbacks to childhood trauma, right? But if you have done a lot of that work and, you have personalities that, have that collaborative, empathetic style, we made it work. And we're both like powerful women. We had our moments, but I think the benefits far outweighed the challenges.
That's great. That's good to hear. And, so there was two ladies here running this business. So it's a business full of feminine energy, which really ties in, segues really nicely into our topic today, which is bringing the feminine principles into entrepreneurship. And I remember when we met the other week, you said, "Hey, I've had a look at your podcast, and it seems to be mostly guys that you've had on there." And I was like, I was like, no, there's definitely been a lot of ladies on there as well. It's just the last chunk that you've looked at are all guys. So, but maybe you're absolutely right, and I need to address that balance a little bit more and get some more ladies on here, and actually have in the interim time that we spoke, booked a few more ladies on the show. So maybe I need to bring some more feminine principles and energy to this podcast. Absolutely, and I'm sure I'm going to learn some things in how to do that today. So one of the first things we kind of wanted to talk about was empathy versus ruthlessness. And to me, of course, the things really are in polarizing opposite ways, and you need good doses of both in the workplace or when you're running a business, but finding the balance between them can be somewhat difficult at times. The ruthlessness side of it, it's business, right? And you have to sometimes remove the personal needs and wants and emotions out of that. It can be very difficult to separate the two, particularly when you're getting started and your heart is so invested in your business. It's your baby in some aspects. I think of my businesses as my babies. Sometimes you nurture them and they grow, and you watch them grow, and then you nurture them some more, and they grow and mature some more. So, but what do you? I'll let you take it away with that subject of empathy versus ruthlessness.
Yeah, and I think to introduce this, I think it's really worth to bringing a bit of a frame between the masculine and the feminine, right? And we tend to I don't want to polarize it only in men and women, right? But there is a lot of because there's masculine and feminine in all of us, and like you said, the key is embracing both. It's not like, oh, one is better than the other, and I certainly don't want this to fall into any sort of discussion or polarized discussion like that. And the fact, right, is that as a society, we have gone very much to the masculine extreme, right? And what that means is that we have elevated and we have valued masculine principles over feminine ones. We deem them superior, right? So we deem the hustle, and I'm generalizing here, right? And this is changing, but we tend to value and put on a pedestal the hustle and the sacrifice and the work hard, and almost being proud of the burnout or being super busy, right? How much have we glorified being busy as if it was a sign of success, or that you're on top of the game, or that you're doing well, right? And so these are just little examples of how, as a society, we have been valuing that masculine over the feminine. And if somebody is if you meet somebody and they're like, oh, you ask them, what are you doing in life? And they're like, oh, I've been taking a break for a few months. A lot of people sort of like judge that, like, oh, what's he doing, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just wasting his time in life. And we see the feminine as either inferior, or we've judged it, we've shamed it. And this is within ourselves and in society, right? So we have shamed and judged and just kind of like pushed away the feminine within ourselves, right? Like rest, emotions, and having moments where we get to experience and feel our emotions rather than push them or shove them away or think that they're just not useful, right? The chaos even, right? It's like we need it to be like, think about, we can talk about crypto right now, we can talk about the stock market, like, we want it to be linear, and we want growth to be like boom. And that's just not how life works, right? Like life and business and everything. Business is just a part of life. It's driven and created by human beings, which are life and our nature. We cannot escape the natural cycles. It is just cyclical, right? Like you can't just go. And I think going back now to the ruthlessness, right? Nobody can just go and be in that masculine without it taking a toll on life itself. So right? You imagine, and men, women, not all women are mostly in their feminine, but women do have more like direct access to the feminine and to the nurturing, and we're more in tune with like life itself, right? Whether it is through our womb and our ability to create life and nurture life, but it's not only in the birthing sense, it's like in life, right? Like I always say, if women made half of the decisions in the world, or if women ruled the world, I promise you that there would not be hunger. Because we are so in tune with the needs and the nurturing of other human beings, right? So what has happened in this like pursuit for ruthlessness and productivity and efficiency, for what, if it is not at the service of life? What is the point of getting like, and let's talk about it individually as an entrepreneur. What is the point of building so many businesses and making so much money and so much growth and having a huge team if I'm killing myself in the process? If I'm literally killing myself, my own life, and I start to get heart attack, right? A lot of health scares that people have when they start not to sleep, when they're just neglecting their feminine, right? Emotional outbursts, etc. Do you know where I'm going? Do you see how it's sort of like set up?
Yeah, I see exactly where you're going, and you see it play out a lot. You see this drive towards ruthlessness and success and how that looks, and always being busy, and at the sacrifice of perhaps family relationships, your own health really at the core. You said that was in the feminine, but even in the masculine, neglecting their own health in the masculine as well, and just sliding down that slope, but not even seeing that you're sliding anywhere, and just thinking that it's the way to be, perhaps because it's the way you've been taught, or some things are taught, some things are caught. It's just the way that you saw other people do it, and you thought that that's how it was meant to be, and you never invested in looking or maybe thinking about an alternative perspective or an alternative way to do things.
Totally. And it's very connected because, because in society, we have not incorporated the feminine in our educational system, right? In our businesses, in our work. The feminine might be a little more like, and I mean women particularly, might be a bit more connected to it naturally. We have things also like our menstrual cycle, for example, that just like forces us to be connected with our body. We can't really escape it, we have things that pull us back into our bodies when men don't, right? And men, it's easier for men to just be on this sort of like rhythm, right? Unless they have something to pull them back. And because the models of masculinity that we learn, right, that men learn, are so disconnected from the feminine. Like, it's like, if you feel emotions, you're a pussy, right? What the fuck, right? Like, what kind of model of men is that? What it does is create the society we live in, right? Of emotionally disconnected men who just, use addictions and repression and are just so disconnected from themselves and their partners, right? Because they can't access this wealth of other part of themselves that they've been taught to like push aside. So bringing it to business, because it's just so important, right? The way we live life and the way society is set up, and our own identity, to how we then spill that identity over into the business world and how we do business, right? Which is what we're getting to now. And by the way, like, I'm a person, and so is my mom, speaking of a feminine-led business, we obviously, as entrepreneurs, it's impossible to be an entrepreneur or a business person if you don't have a really healthy masculine, right? Like, your masculine like has to be in place, like really potently. And so my mom and I, we are very empathetic, and also have that masculine when it needs to come in, right? Hey, this is what needs to be done. Hey, you know what? Like, there's moments when you bring in the empathy, and there's moments where you're like, you know what? This is what we said. This is what needs to be done. This is, and we bring in that more, we can call, I don't want to call it exactly ruthless, but it is like this more goal-oriented decision making, where you're not flexible with some things, because otherwise nothing gets done. And that is, those are the principles, right? It's like life, and this is like getting a little philosophical, but life is on the edge of like order and chaos. Too much order and we become rigid and stagnant. Too much chaos, we go fucking crazy. I hope nobody minds if I curse. And and so, okay. And so like, we're always there. And that's how the stock market is, right? It's sort of like, we always have these cycles and things. And so sometimes everything's okay in life, and we're, there's order and structure. And then sometimes everything goes to shit, and that's the birthplace for a new form of order, right? And we're always there. So it's the same with this sort of ruthlessness and empathy. And one of the things that, now thinking back on me and my mom's business, right? One of the things that characterized us, and we're still one of the leading Camino companies, and this is a huge spot. And when we were growing, I think, 3 companies were from people that literally stabbed us in the back and went to do their own thing. And then in the course of when we were just growing like crazy, which actually started when the crisis hit in 2008, I think at least 30 different Camino companies sprung up, and it never affected us, right? And one of the things that we brought was, one of our slogans was, love is in the details. It was this like super empathetic, warm, welcoming, like this personal touch, right, in the services that we created, where we actually went to greet every single group of pilgrims, and we had about 700 to 800 pilgrims per year, and we would travel to every starting point in Spain and Portugal to greet the groups and to give them these little things that would make them feel so special, right? And we would very often take a hit in profit for just making certain moments really special and certain things happen, right? Like, we knew that if we were just making profit and growing, that was not in itself going to make anyone feel fulfilled. Like, that was not in alignment with our values as human beings. Yeah.
I think it's always important to know what your values are, and if you can incorporate them into your business. And they're things like honesty, integrity, being the difference, which is something you mentioned there, being the difference, being the standout in a world that's very fast paced, full of lots of competition, and people have access to level playing field. The thing called the internet, which we're featuring on right now, is a level playing field, and people can access all of your competition in one place, and even kind of compare them up, apples for apples alongside you. So being the difference is a really important thing, and going the extra mile to not only, I say about one of my businesses, one of our key values is not just to please or satisfy the customers, but to amaze them, from the start right through and well after their purchase, whether that be product or service experience in your case. So yeah, I think they're all, if you can bring your own core values in line with your business, which I really think you can most of the time. Your business is in some ways, intents and purposes, an extension of you. And when people are buying, they are buying from, a human being, a person, even though there's a screen in front of that, there's a person behind it. And I think if you can bring those core values in, it always should be done.
Yeah, I think separating business from like our humanity makes no sense. It's like business is for humans. Like everything we do, right? Like business is just a solution to a problem. Right? I teach entrepreneurship, right? That's literally what business is, right? There's a problem that normally human beings have, or it affects human beings to some capacity. And then another human being comes and like, oh, here's a solution. Let me monetize it, right? I can provide, this is the value. The value I provide is the solution to your problem. And so, like, everything is by humans for humans. How could we have created a system? And again, this is where the masculine polarization comes in. How can we have separated it from that? How can we create systems where, and this is how the world, and I want to bring this in because I think it's irrelevant. This is how the model works. Like today, look at what we've done to planet Earth. And this is what a polarized into the masculine world looks like. It is growth at the expense of life. For what? For what? So we all end up dead? Like where is the growth taking you to if it's not pure lust for power and money? And because what do you want money for? You want it to get something else with it, don't you? What do you want? A house because you want to be happy? Like when you take it to why, what do we all want? Love, happiness, health, our loved ones to be taken care of. Maybe we want some nice things in life, but why do we want the car? Probably it's to feel really cool in the car, you want to feel a certain way, or you want to impress someone with it because you want love and connection and belonging. Like it all goes down to that, Yeah. And so if we're not aware of why we're chasing what we're chasing, we lose ourselves individually and collectively. And that's a lot of the world we live in today. It's just a corrupt, growth driven, and nobody's asking like, why are we all doing this? What's the hamster wheel all about?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's certainly some awareness around it and a lot of people changing it, and that plays out as it has in the past 12 to 18 months with an awful lot of people starting their own businesses just because they've either wanted to for a long time and they've had the down and quiet time to be able to do it. And I see that playing out a lot, or just because they've been presented with problems and they've seen an opportunity to solve that problem. Like you said, business is just solving a problem, and they've gone forth and done it. And I see a lot of people doing it. I see a lot of people starting, particularly I've seen a lot of people doing fashion. A lot of a few of my female friends have started their own fashion brands. And I think it's fantastic. It's a great time for opportunity to solve these problems and seize these opportunities.
Yeah, and even like if you think of last year, speaking of models and paradigms shifting, right? I think in general, a lot of people before like 2020 hit wanted to work from home or thought they could, but there was this sort of like guilt and shame around it, or I have to prove myself, or if I ask this, they're going to think I'm not working hard enough. And maybe this again, hustle culture of the one who stays the latest is the hardest working, like all these bullshit things that have really nothing to do about what is being productive and effective. Because I personally believe as an employer and as an entrepreneur, nobody is made to work in an office or in front of a computer for like 8 hours in a row. That is just like ridiculous. I think I would never be productive or get done half of what I get done if that was my work schedule. Right. Yeah. And so, but a lot of people, it's one of these things that has been so set in culture and in corporate culture and in the way we do things that there was a fear around questioning it. And now, boom, right? total like hit of this, and everyone's working from home, and so many companies, right? One of my cousins works in Ford, for example, and she was like, yeah, we're not going back. This is just like, in her teams, and there's a lot of companies that said this, like, wow, we've actually seen that productivity and output like has not decreased on any level, and it has increased in some cases. And it's like, when you are working from home, obviously you have to have some level of self-discipline, and that's, the masculine, but there is this, like, you live a life that's a bit more natural, and you can get up and have a cup of tea, and maybe you have a 30-minute nap, right? Maybe you go for a walk midday and then you work a few hours later, like, but you're more connected to life and nature and what is happening within your body, rather than like, okay, this is the box, let me just like force myself to fit in it so that I can get approval from everyone else. Oh God.
Yeah.
Can't live like that.
I know. No, I mean, I was a tradesman for many years, and so I never had the kind of whole office thing going on. And even now, I only spend maximum. It depends. Sometimes if I pull a crazy nighttime thing to try and get something done before a deadline, which is usually pretty close before it actually needs done. But I'll never spend more than maybe 4 or 6 hours in an office with regular breaks or in front of a screen. It's just doesn't align with me, doesn't work for me. But I do question how some people do it, and the impact it has on their health, particularly in the long term.
And it shows, speaking of the feminine, like, I think for a lot of people, how disconnected we are from ourselves. All right. I was just hearing a story of a podcast this morning of this journalist who had the stomach pain for a while and just kind of, didn't listen to it. And then he had this dream that he was going to die, he died. And then 2 days later, he had an aneurysm, and he'd had a near-death experience. And, the point is that, like, life is, and this is part of the feminine, right? It's like being tuned in and in touch with your inner world. And it's like, we're so out there all of the time, right? And I'm going to bring something that's a little bit, maybe interesting for this podcast, but, even in terms of our sexual organs, they very much represent, right? It's like the masculine is like outward and direction oriented and like boom. And the feminine is inward and like mysterious. And, it's just like, but it's really like that. It's inward. And so the feminine is going inwards, right? Into yourself. It's stopping not doing anymore so that you can tune in and explore what is within. And that's why I think meditation and mindfulness, for example, are principles that have allowed us to explore more of that inner world, that allowed us to stop. And yeah, although sometimes those practices even can become a bit masculine when they're just like be completely still, when the feminine asks for more movement, right? Yeah. It can flow. It doesn't have to be just, okay, complete presence and sitting here and it's what are you being asked to do now? It's being fluid and moving and flexible. So yeah.
It's really interesting because I do quite a bit of meditation, and I always it always works better for me. And I like to do guided. I prefer guided, and it always works a lot better for me when it's a female voice. Not to say I don't listen to male voices as well. When I use Headspace, I like to flick between a few of the voices you can listen to on there. But typically I use one channel on YouTube called The Mindful Movement. And there's a lady on there called Sarah Raymond, and she just has this really soft, really nice American accent that just gets me in the zone every time. Like you say, it's not always interesting, actually, because it kind of made me realise that in my own mind that there's actually of course there's a masculine and a feminine to everything. And just in having this conversation, it's opening up my mind to everything. Literally everything has that. Even in meditation, you have that masculine and that feminine side, and which more of a side that I lean to. And it's actually, while you've been speaking, it's made me think about the wider scope of this podcast. And I mean, you look at that logo in the corner there, and the hunger for the hustle is very masculine in really all its ways. Even when you look at the logo, the two fists bumping there, it's very masculine. So it's really nice to kind of know that it doesn't have to just be about masculinity on the show, and we can bring femininity, nearly couldn't say that word then, I think I said it right, femininity into this space, this hour, and I'm sure everyone can enjoy that, seeing that aspect of it come in.
Yeah.
Now, the next topic that we were going to cover is consider emotions, don't override them. Wow. And I mean, what an on-point thing for me at the moment, you will know through some conversations we had just the other week, that it's been a big thing for me lately, you know, considering your emotions and your feelings, and sitting with them, instead of just, I used to do a lot of just this overly masculine repel, you know, like the kind of classic masculine way of looking at it, particularly if you're on a building site, is, oh, you know, harden up, you'll get over it. No need to talk about it much more than that. Let's scan past it and move on. And that really, look, it probably can work to dam up your feelings for a while, but I think in the end you really get into a place of more constriction and more restrictedness within yourself, and not being able to express yourself, and that's not healthy at all. So that's kind of my journey of that, and then being able to sit with the emotions and with the feelings, and, you know, what's behind them, what's behind that, and stripping right back to it, and perhaps getting pen to paper, so it's not just, it clears that kind of fog surrounding it. It's very, very beneficial, and I don't think it's something that all guys do at all. It's something I'm always telling my friends about and suggesting to do. I don't know how many of them listen to me, but it's worked for me for sure. But I mean, in regards to tying that into feminine principles in entrepreneurship, that's where you're going to have to take the floor there, Samantha.
Yeah, God, there's so much on this topic. But I think it's like, okay, just to put again this frame of how the emotions fit in this world. We've been living in a masculine dominated world, right, with masculine principles, and then business as a frame is more masculine, and there's more men running it. So it's normal that there's like this disregard for emotions, and that, let's be honest, right, like we tend to see emotions as more of a female thing, right? If a woman is emotional, and I'm not saying emotional in the negative connotation of the word, right? It could be enthusiastic, right? It could be just like, right? Or it could be just like crying, right? It's like, it's more okay if a woman's doing that than if a man's doing that. It's just, that's the way we live. That's the way it is. Yeah. And and so it is a challenge to be like, all right, where do emotions fit into business, right? Like it's quite difficult, but I think that emotions can be because if you are doing in spite of your emotions, we fall into the same, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? If you're doing and you're miserable and you're like quieting down that, I don't know, despair or anger or sadness because you're following the expectation of who, right? It's like, of who, what's the program? Whose values are you driving? What's driving your decisions if it's not how you are feeling? So it's like, if you're not connected to your emotions, it's very difficult to be connected to your intuition, because intuition is a really important topic here, especially for entrepreneurship, because God, I think one of the most difficult things of being an entrepreneur is the amount of decisions we have to make all of the time. And a lot of the time, I remember like with my businesses, like all the time I get to the stage and I'm like, how do people do this? What do people do, right? And I start talking to my other entrepreneurial friends or my friends who work in consulting companies, and I'm like, how do people go about this one thing? And I've learned more and more and more to be like, and this is what I teach my students, right, who are entrepreneurs. Yeah, you can get, look at how other people are doing it and get some things, but ultimately there is no one way to do it. We think like other people figured it out, sort of thing, right? Like, oh, somebody else has the answer and I just don't know. And it's like, no, you can like pave a different path. You can be the leader of how other people will do it. Right? But for that, you have to be really in tune with why you're doing what you're doing and why you started in the first place. And bringing that emotional connection is critical if you want to stay on path as an entrepreneur, or you'll just be deviated. And, I won't get into like actual emotional intelligence, but emotions in general, I think for guys, one of the reasons that they are forced into emotional intelligence, it certainly won't be because of entrepreneurship. It's mostly because of relationships and love. That's one of the reasons that I see guys and men finally opening up to welcoming in their emotions, right? To having a little more access, because women that are in their feminine, it's different if, it's a woman that's in her masculine, but women who are in their feminine and embody that essence are always going to crave and want an emotional connection with you. And if you're not connected to your emotions and you have repressed them, pushed them away, don't want to see them, think that stuff is bullshit, you'll never be able to have a real loving, emotionally intimate relationship with a woman, or with a man who embodies the feminine, right? Whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, one of the places that breaks men, not only through being with a woman, but also through heartbreak. As I taught a class on awakened relationships just 2 days ago. That's part of my membership. And one of the things I said is when your heart breaks, like it doesn't shatter, but it breaks open, and it finally allows you to feel and access emotions that are so strong you just can't push them away anymore. And for so many men, that's so uncomfortable. And I remember I had this student and client once that called me after years of me being his teacher, because he had his first heartbreak in his life. And he's a big entrepreneur, investor. And he's just like, he was like, I don't know what's happening to me. Like, and I was like, you're feeling, like, this is emotions. Hello, welcome to the world. And he's in a very different spot right now.
Yeah.
But I had to really explain to him how this was an opportunity to reconnect with his emotions in a world that unless you have a feminine around you that's asking that of you, it's not really required, right? In the world and the way we do business today.
Yeah. Well, I think it brings to mind that on that subject, do you think then that there's never a perfect balance to many things, but a real nice way of running a business would be to have a male and a female running it and have those two energies, working together and bringing up the sides, when someone's like, oh, let's do it this way, in this ruthless way. And then the lady might go, hey, why don't we do it with, a bit more like this, a bit more perhaps customer focused, a bit more empathy, a bit more why we're here to serve our customers, and how does that look, and how do we want those customers to feel when they receive our products and services. What do you think about that, the balance of having the male and the female in a business and then running it together?
I think that, like, firstly, right, and this is in every dimension of life, but also business, the first point is that even if you're a sole entrepreneur, that you have integrated both the feminine and the masculine within yourself. Because that's the first point, right? And me as an entrepreneur, for example, I'm a person that, especially, I've done a lot, because I'm an entrepreneur and we live in this masculine dominated world. And this is what happens with a lot of women nowadays. Women, instead of integrating both and embodying all of their essence, we have been imitating the masculine. Right? And it's been a disaster, like a disaster for everything from our own emotional and intuitive connection to our fertility, to our ability to attract and be with the kind of men that we want, because who wants to be with an overly controlling, structured, leading sort of woman that is not connected to her other nurturing side? Like, it doesn't create the polarity. So I want to give this example because I like I said, it's not about men and women in general, right? In business, and I've worked with a lot of my past partners, very often I'm in the masculine. Like
Mm. Yeah.
I tend to be the one that is like, okay, wait, but what's the point of this? And how are we going to get this done? And, you know, really the practical, structured, making the plan. Okay, let's set the goals. Let's be accountable. When my partners have tended to be more the ideas person and the more creative one. And, oh, yeah, what if, you know, and this and that. And I'm like, okay, hold on, right? So this is an example of the masculine and the feminine, but in like, let's say opposite bodies, right? Of like me being the
Yeah.
masculine and my partner being feminine. And I often have that role in business, right? That is why I can be an entrepreneur, because I have a very developed masculine. But
Hmm.
now the way that it looks in my business, and I actually, there's this thing, it's really cool in entrepreneurship called echo cycle planning. And it's like an infinity loop, which is an alternative to like, let's say the growth linear sort of structure. And it's like in your business, having phases, because this is going to happen anyway, right? Like there's going to be external forces that are going to force your business to shift and pivot. It's just part of being part of business, part of life,
Yeah.
part of the economy. But we can incorporate this like cycles of work and rest, for example, but also cycles of, okay, do we need to be focused or do we need to take a step back and just actually create some chaos and be like, okay, what are we doing? Is this really working? Let's create fluidity and bring more ideas and bring the creativity and questioning things, and let's embrace the chaos. Let's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that naturally happens as well. I just want to bring this, I think it's interesting for women. It naturally happens with our menstrual cycle. And I have a really good friend who has a company and it's all women, and it's a pretty big team, and they incorporate these like the menstrual cycles. I teach this a lot with all of the women, so the women always know which part of the menstrual cycle everyone's in. And it's like in the menstrual cycle we have like half like two, and it's important for both men and women to know this. Like all men, like half of the world's population is women, you know, and most like, you know, I don't
Newsflash.
know, and a lot of men are with women, right? A lot of women are with, like, women are just, you know, half of the world, and everyone should know the things that we go through and experience. And in the menstrual cycle, it's like there's these 2 weeks of more finishing things off and getting like a bit more creative and in tune and inward. And then there's these 2 weeks of doing and meeting people and ideating and bringing things to life and working 60-hour weeks. And it's like, it's really beautiful when, as an entrepreneur, at least as a woman, right, we're really in tune with that. And when I try to override that, which was like last week, my body's like, no, you know, like I'm like, I have so much to do, this and that. And like literally my body, I was just like, it was just forcing me to just like go to that sofa over there and like curling up. And I wrote a lot during that time,
Yeah.
right? And it's just this other sort of productivity,
Yeah.
right? That
Mm.
comes from what that brings, that other dimension of life that is not just doing, executing, moving forward, getting the shit done. It's just as productive when we shift the paradigm of productivity.
I like that. I like that. And it's interesting how you found in that time, you know, you said you curled up on the sofa there. The mind wanted to get shit done and keep it moving, but your body was just like, no, not at the moment. Just, you know, just stay on the sofa, take it easy. But you still found it, you still managed to bring some creativity into that and found it a good space to do some writing.
And sometimes, like, it's crazy because I've noticed, God, the world we live in and the way everything's set up, I've noticed, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, how many moments do we have in our day of non-doing? You know, like just looking out the windows, you know, just sort of like being on a tram, just like being. And I
Yeah.
notice when a lot of us, when we have these in between times, there's this default to like pick up the phone and scroll. And sometimes I'm in this mode where it's ridiculous, right? I feel like I have to get all this stuff done. And I'm just doing this weird, frantic, I have like always at any given time, like 40 tabs open on my computer. And I'm doing this frantic, like, moving between tabs and opening windows and closing windows, and pick up my phone and checking messages. And I open apps that I already checked that I know there's no new messages, but just in case, and then kind of look at my email and refresh the email thing. Like,
yeah,
it's this weird, can't stop. You know,
yeah,
like, and now I become aware of it, and I'm like, oof. And sometimes I now more and more put my phone on airplane mode.
yeah,
And sometimes I actually stop everything I'm doing and I just lay on the floor with the sun in my face for
mhm,
10, 15 minutes. Right. When maybe my mind is like, go for a walk, but I'm like, no, I don't want to go for a walk. We don't have enough time today. And I'm like, okay, let's just then find another, let me negotiate with myself. I'm just
yeah,
gonna lay here, and then I put some music on, and there's this space and freedom and clarity, even of what I have to, when I have so much to do that I don't know where to start. My morning routine, I make it longer. I used to be like, no, I gotta get going, and now I'm like, no, now you're gonna
right,
sit there for a
okay,
little bit longer to really connect with what's the most important thing. Like, what's my one thing I want to finish with today? And I just I sit with it, and I'm like thinking about life and thinking about, because as an entrepreneur, my God, I think we all know, like, there's 25 million things happening at the same time. I'm a project manager, right? I write courses for a college. I have my company in Spain. I have my company here. I just launched a membership, 12-week program. Like, there's so many. I do, like, I
yeah,
might have some assistance here and there with some things, but
yeah,
you're the salesperson. I'm the marketing person. I'm the creator. I'm customer service. Like, I'm the accountant. I'm
yeah,
freaking everything.
yeah. I know,
So yeah,
I know how it
it's
looks and
so
how it
easy.
thinks and how it feels as well.
It's so
It,
easy to go into overdrive. You know.
it is, particularly, when we have these devices, sometimes more than one. I'm looking at two right here next to me, and there's that always, being plugged into the matrix, always being connected to it, always wanting to, when you're an entrepreneur and it is your thing, to act as quickly as you can and execute as quickly as you can, and that kind of almost like anxiety loop you get stuck in of checking this app, checking that app, refreshing that, and it's just like it's silly. It's silly because it doesn't make you be any more productive or get anything done any quicker. You might take action on them straight away, but sometimes you just almost like predicating and wanting the productivity to be more and more. And it's like, well, at what level does that balance off? And you find that I'm not, I'm over compensating and I'm not working at my optimum level. And it doesn't, how long does it last? I
And
don't
I
think
want
that
to
much.
say something about this that you're reminding me of, Jake. Like, I just want to say this because it's so important. When we are in masculine overdrive, men or women, this is exactly what you were saying that I've experienced my whole life. No matter what you do, it's never enough.
Mm,
When you're in masculine overdrive, it doesn't matter how much you do, it is never enough. Why? Because you don't think you're enough.
right. Wow. Revelation. That's like, that's 2020 in a nutshell for me right there.
Yeah. And it's so critical because and this is really important. I obviously I'm a coach, and I do all of this stuff. And one of the biggest patterns I see even in the women that I mentor that are in their masculine overdrive, that have big companies and have achieved beautiful things in the space of entrepreneurship, is that it's never enough. It's never enough. And the thing is that when your self-worth is low and you're not nurturing your self-esteem and your self-love and your self-acceptance, that drive and even entrepreneurship and business becomes a way to overcompensate for your lack of self-worth.
Yeah.
And
You hide in it, right?
yeah. And it's funny because it's like, you have to love yourself to some degree to allow yourself to rest. But if you don't think you're worthy of rest, if you don't think you're worthy of love, if you don't think you're worthy of being nurtured, of being taken care of receiving, you have a drive to overgive. And you're just trying to prove your enoughness. And I actually want to leave this like reflection for all entrepreneurs out there that might be listening to this. It's like how much, and I know for all of us, it is to some degree, I'm not exempting of that. It is a want to prove something. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but how can we all connect more with our innate sense of worth? That is, regardless of what we achieve or how much money we make or how much our business grows, because the truth and the reality is that your worth as a human being does not depend on any level on how well your business is doing or how much you're doing out there in the world or how much money you have at all. And the fact that we have tied our identity as human beings to that is really detrimental for our life, right? And for our relationships, because then if we don't think we're worthy of receiving, we even sabotage our own businesses sometimes, you know, like it's ridiculous, but that's another story. But can you love yourself enough to allow yourself to feel, to allow yourself to receive, to give yourself that rest so that when you are doing, it's from that aligned place. It's from like, I'm doing it out of the passion. I'm doing it because it brings me to life. I'm doing it because I love this, not because I'm trying to prove to myself that I'm worthy. Because then it's a dead end. You know, you already lost the game the moment you thought that was debatable.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that's blown me away, that has, because a lot of what you said there I could align with. A lot of it came up for me and made me think of things in the past that was, you know, my ways in which I used to operate, and it was just masculine all the time. And I think a lot of that comes from perhaps working for a long time in a masculine dominated industry, i.e. construction. You know, it is 95, maybe even 99% men on site. And that kind of, but I am someone, I would say, who's certainly in touch with the feminine, but I can also be very guilty of just having massive segments or massive amounts of masculinity at any one time. And what you said there, I actually had to write that down because it aligned with me so much. The masculine overdrive, where you're in this space of there's never enough, and there's never enough because I am not enough, you know, and that's how those things kind of interconnect. And real revelations for me there. And I hope the guys watching can take some sage advice from this time we've had together, because I know I have. Now sorry, go ahead. Something you want to say.
I just wanted to say to that as well, like I noticed that a lot in myself with my business, you know, like just needing to, and even just like being like, why am I not at this place yet? Why haven't I reached this other place yet? And I had to, and it's been difficult for me to rewire this in the world we live in. It's because we're not in a world that's like, oh, rest, my entrepreneurial friend. You know what I mean? Like nobody's telling you that. Like, so it's like, okay, how can I be that reminder for myself? And I have a reminder, like literally since I moved to Australia for the past 3 years, that pops up on my phone and computer every 2 weeks. And it says, just do your thing and enjoy the process. And it's that reminder that if I'm not enjoying the process, none of this is worth it, you know? And it pulls me back when I'm going into that overdrive and that like, wait, hold on, right? And this is where I use my masculine, which is that protective, fierce energy, to guard my feminine and my rest, you know? And it's like, no, I'm not available anymore after this time. Boundary, right? Like, and that's my masculine, but to protect my feminine, or I'm feeling something, I'm emotional, I need to give myself a few hours or a day to process this stuff and to just be and sit with this unavailable, right? Unapologetically.
Yeah. And I think boundaries is a really interesting one that involves doses of both, because I would say boundaries are something that you would think of as being more of a feminine thing in the outset, but then you have to bring masculine in to enforce them and set them. Would you agree with that, or am I way off there? I guess it's
no. I see. No, I see where you're going. Yeah, ultimately they're concepts, so it's not like black or white. But I think I see boundaries as masculine. The thing is that, remember that, like, one can't live without the other. Like, there's no such thing. Like, nobody can be purely in their feminine, because we'd just be like flowing all the time. Like, and nobody can. It doesn't exist. But when it's the firm, this is the line. Like, because it's the structure. There's no fluidity. This is where the line is. This is where you end and I begin. You know, like, here's a line. That's masculine. And the feminine is the flexibility. Well, you know, but, you know, right now, the circumstances that I'm feeling right now, so let's just make, you know, maybe we can move this boundary a little bit.
Yeah.
But obviously any woman or any feminine person embodied in their feminine, if they are, because this is the thing, if we're in the wounded feminine space or wounded masculine, it's a different topic, but when you are in your elevated expression of your feminine, you have to have an integrated masculine. Like, a healthy feminine has the healthy masculine, has the ability to set boundaries from a place of love, you know? It's just, it has to happen that way. This is, we can get into this so much deeper, but I'll stop myself.
Well, look, that's why I said I think we need more than one episode here. I think we can definitely get some, maybe 2 or 3 hours out of this. I mean, we've still left out one of the 3 topics we were going to touch on today. I knew there was going to be so much value here. I knew we were going to have some deep, meaningful conversations, which is part of the reason why the podcast is here. You know, that's what's great about the podcast format, because you can just get wrapped up and enthralled in it, and there's no one telling you what you can and can't speak about. You can curse, like you did a couple of times there, and I was going to tell you off.
Thank God, that's a hard one for me.
So Samantha, you touched on it quickly, but I would just like to talk about it before you go. You know, a bit more about what you do and how you help other entrepreneurs. I'm going to drop the handle for the Self-Made Club, the Self Club, in the comments, so you guys can connect with Samantha if you want to. But yeah, please tell us a bit more about how you help entrepreneurs and business owners.
Yeah, so I mean, I teach entrepreneurship and I write courses in entrepreneurship, but separate from that, with the Self Club, it's not specifically for entrepreneurs, but it's more for change makers, and a lot of them happen to be entrepreneurs. I just launched a membership. I have a 12-week program for women, that are like these hardworking, perfectionist women, very much in their masculine overdrive, and it's really 12 weeks of building that solid sense of self-worth and self-love within yourself. Yeah, that's what the 12-week program is. But I just launched a membership that's not for women, it's for men and women. And it's like that space, because it's so hard to give it to ourselves. I want to be that place. And that's what I've always been for people. That's the problems, right? I've always solved in everyone's life. Like, I reconnect people with what's important. I bring people like back into alignment, you know? And it's not with what I think is important, but what they deep down think is important, but their life has sort of steered off in this other external expectation direction. So the Self Club now is like this membership where there's a few different spaces. There's a men's circle and a women's circle. There's 2 meditations per month, and there's like a community reunion space and the class space. It's like these set spaces, digital, all online, where people just come back and reconnect. No matter what you're doing in life, a bit of accountability, realignment. Yeah, it's really exciting. I love it.
No, it's good. It's important to love what you do, and I can tell that, I can sense that in the way that you talk about it, in the way you express it, and also, you know, from your content that I've been digesting online. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today. I know I've got a lot of value from it, and I hope the guys, wherever they're listening from, for wherever they are around the world, have too. And
I hope so, Jake. Thank you so much for having me, and I really hope we get to do another one, because I think there's a lot of juiciness here. Thanks, everyone.
Plenty of juiciness, and we'll definitely do another one. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Whatever platform you're listening on, wherever you are in the world, if you've got some value from the episode, please share with your friends and family, as they might get some value too. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry, and keep on hustling, everyone.